All right. Welcome to Dance Ninjas Dance Training number 2. And I've got 3 write-in questions already today. So I'm going to start off with one of those, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so this one is from Jennifer. She asked, how do I learn to fuse with movements that I don't have in my repertoire yet? So, for instance, Latin movement or shimmies. If she's never learned these, how does she fuse with someone who's doing those movements? For me, this is going to be a 3-part answer. And so the first thing I would say is, I mean, obviously, and this is the obvious one, more movement equals more muscle memory, right? So the more different movements you put in your body, the more muscle memory you'll get, and the more easy it becomes to then pull something out. But that's putting it into your repertoire, right? But still, even by doing more movement that's just different, like even if you never do shimmies, if you do something else that involves movement of your shoulders, you'll start learning how those muscles work so that you can apply them in ways that you've never done before. So, I mean, what's an example? Like, I mean, we all use our fingers every day, but maybe we've never done the actual Spock thing before, right? And it doesn't take long to figure it out because we've done other movements of our fingers that then do similar things. But so that's maybe like the obvious answer. But then there's maybe a couple more detailed answers that I can give. And so that would be, I would focus on practicing matching the connection and matching the visual of my partner. So a lot of information is passed through connection a lot of times. Not always, but a lot of times stuff is passed through connection. So if you look at being able to connect to somebody's feet, right? If you look at, can I borrow you, Christina? If I want to connect to Christina's feet, like, and I'm using the hand to connect or using the back or something, let's start with the hand because that's even harder. In order to connect to her feet, first I need to connect to her stomach, right? And then in order to connect to her stomach, I need to connect to this shoulder. In order to connect to this shoulder, I need to connect here or go into the closed position, right? So, and that's the same with her, with me. If she wants to follow some footwork that I do, first she needs to connect to my stomach, then to my shoulder, then to my fingers. But maybe the easier way to think about this is by doing it backwards and actually starting out and going, okay, the first connection that I have the ability to connect with my partner is hand. So I need to really focus on learning to be able to connect a pull connection where we're both pulling in the opposite directions, or a push connection where we're pushing into each other, or a relaxed connection where we're totally relaxed, or even if I were to pull in that direction towards the screen, she would match the opposite and pull the other way, or the vice versa. If I pull away from the screen, she matches. She likes to say it's equal and opposite reaction, right? You want to match the equal and opposite connection of your partner. So getting that allows you then to match footwork variations. So if you watch, if she has the push connection with me, right, then I can move her foot back, right? And I can even, if she matches the push and rotates, right, I can get it to do other things where it rotates and goes back. Or I can get it to rotate, right, like rotate and then maybe even take a step, right? But it all comes from first getting this connection, and then after having this kind of simple, like push, pull, relax, it also goes into, are we matching our ability to expand the arms and contract the arms so that our arms are going out and in together instead of one arm. Could you lock your arms in place? Instead of her arm locking in place and my arm moving, right? We both learn to move our arms together so that they expand and contract together. So that would be the next thing. And then once you have that, it would be now matching angles of the body within that. So if I twist like this, she's twisting like that. If I twist like this, right? If I sit with my body back, she sits back. If I lean in, she leans in. And all our angles with our body are matching. And that's I think of every joint matching. So if we look at the angle between my hip and her hip, right? It going back and matching versus if she stays right like that and I go even further, now we're not matching our hip angle, right? But our knee angle is still matching. Whereas if I come back, now everything's matching and I change my knee angle, right? She matches that knee angle, right? So everything, each joint is matching up to a line, and if you do that, then obviously you're going to be matching a lot more of their body. So that's kind of the technical method that I would go about improving my ability to match someone through connection. But you also have through visual, right? And that can be done just with games where you're actually just watching each other and you're twisting and matching someone. Maybe. Right. So you can play games to match and do different things like that. I think that's good. But the thing I'm going to say that you can do, like really easy, kind of starting off on your own, is when you dance with someone, without even like trying to match everything, think about one thing. Start off with just matching the essence of what they're doing. So if they're giving you, a shimmy like that, maybe you do something that's just like in the butt. Maybe you know that you don't shimmy as well there. Or if they give you a shimmy but they get low, right, maybe you just get low with them and you don't shimmy. So there's other aspects of what they're doing that maybe you can match while you're still learning the aspects that you don't know yet. Let's see. Yeah, so that's kind of the third thing that I would think of is matching the essence something, giving them the feeling that you're with them. It could even be the rhythm. For instance, if they give a rhythm that's do, 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 right, then you can give a rhythm that's do, 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 right, or do, 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 right, or just shoulders up, right, but just giving that rhythm that's the same as them. If they're like that, then going right can match the essence of what they're doing without having to do the exact same thing. All right, if there's any questions on that, pop them in. Otherwise, I can move on to the next. The next two questions I have are about hops and skips and about aerials, but the person is not going to be on the call today, so I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has that's on the call and do those towards the end of the call, just in case someone wants something more personal while they're here and they don't have that much time. So feel free, pop something in the chat. I'll give you about 30 seconds to ask any questions. Otherwise, I'll move on to hops and skips or the aerial questions. I guess I should also ask, can everybody hear me? And just pop in the text that yes, can see you and hear you. Everything is good. I assume if you're still on the call and you haven't chatted anything that it is working, but maybe the chat's not working for some reason. So. Gotcha. Everybody's answering now. Nicole asks, what is the key to keeping Lindy on track? And Nicole, could you explain what you mean by on track? Do you mean like on a line or something? Or do you mean just like doing good swing outs? I'm not really sure what that means, keeping Lindy on track. Keeping Lindy on track in terms of the back step and not making it more like East Coast. That's a good question. What's the difference between East Coast and Lindy Hop? Because just to be clear, within Lindy Hop we use a lot of East Coast steps. However, I do believe that the way that we do our East Coast steps has a feel of Lindy Hop versus a feel of East Coast swing. And my thought, like, when I think of East Coast swing, I think usually more single time and less directional movement, less intentional. So, can we? So, actually, let me move this out of the way. So when I think East Coast swing, I think of things where we're going like rock, step, hold, boom, pop, pop, boom, pop, pop. So there's a lot of kind of chill out and pause type stuff, boom, right? Even if you triple step it, it's not primarily done with the same dynamic that you can get with Lindy Hop. If I take all these same steps and do the exact same stuff, it's going to look more like rock, step, rock. So there's a lot more movement involved. Boom. It's still the rock step. I feel like it's still a very similar feel. I definitely look for more stretch in my rock step, so that it's definitely a bigger thing for the most part in Lindy Hop, usually because Lindy Hop is so, well, East Coast swing can be really energetic too. I don't know, other than the technique that I've learned within Lindy Hop is to really get a lot of stretch in your movements as you're going. So well, it has a little bit more energy and using all the space, I guess, would be one thing that I think of. I'm really trying to use everything. So if you watch a 6-count East Coast, what I would normally do just to get someone to do a side pass past me, I would do something like that, and we'd still end up somewhat close to each other. Whereas with a Lindy Hop one, if I'm doing the same thing, I'm going to be stretching back more, sending them a lot farther before I go into my next thing. Usually. But again, that's the thing. It really depends on how you're doing East Coast swing, because some people will teach East Coast swing as just the beginning of Lindy Hop, and so they'll teach all the same what I'm doing the way that I do it, but they'll teach it as East Coast swing instead of as 6-count Lindy Hop. And so it really just depends. As far as the back step, I feel like the technique within an East Coast swing back step and a Lindy Hop back step is primarily the same, with the exception of Lindy Hop tends to have more stretch. But also in Lindy Hop, we don't necessarily do a back step. Maybe that's what you're also wondering, is in Lindy Hop, right, a lot of times we'll pull forward instead of a back step. So instead of going rock step and then doing a triple step, right, we'll actually bring it forward. We'll go 1, 2, triple step, bring it forward, triple step, boom, right, bring it this way, triple. So even in a 6 count or an 8 count, we can bring it forward. And in East Coast swing, I've never heard anyone talk about bringing the step forward instead of rocking it back. Of course, you can always change things up within a dance, but I've never seen that. And Lindy Hop is definitely one where you can bring the rock step in a variety of ways. You can do it rocking back. You can do it walk forward. You can do it with like a hitch, where you're kind of like staying in place, but it looks like you're going back. So there's a lot more variety in it. Nicole, does that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up question on that? And I guess my suggestion for practicing those, for me to practice Lindy, would be really getting triple steps to move more. Because in Lindy Hop, we tend to move a lot in our swing outs and in everything. We tend to really get them going. And there's a lot of hesitations that we're taught in East Coast swing, where we kind of go triple step and we hold, right? We go over here and then we stay in place. We go over here and then we stay in place. But in Lindy Hop, the triple steps usually travel and they don't hang out too much. So a triple step will go triple step, where you're actually crossing through your movement. If you watch in a rock step, triple step, I'm continuously moving this way, versus if I were to do it with more of an East Coast swing style, it would probably go rock, step, hang out here, and then go again. You see that difference? If I slow it down, I'll try to slow it down for you. So in the Lindy Hop one, we're going to go rock, step, 1 and 2, or 3 and 4, right? 5 and 6. So you see how each foot kept going down the line? Whereas in East Coast swing, the big difference is 1, 2, on 3, watch this foot, instead of crossing like in the other one, it's going to come together and hang out here as I pivot, and then go, and then hang out here, right? So you get these stop moments where it goes rock, step, hang out here, move, hang out. That tends to be what you get. Okay, any other questions on that? Or anything else before I move on to hop, skips, lifts, and jumps? Okay. I haven't heard anything, so I think I'm going to go on. So this question was, I have noticed many of my partners lately have been doing skips and hops. And I feel like I'm not being light enough on my feet to be able to follow their lead, at least not gracefully. So how can I lighten up my dance without being bouncy so I can follow more easily? Are there certain moves that I can learn that will help me achieve that effect? Okay, so for me, this is another three-part question, or three-part answer, I guess. So absolutely, first thing, like I said earlier, practice hops and skips on your own. And practice the ones you've seen, make up your own, right? The more you get used to moving your own body in certain ways, the easier it becomes to move when someone else leads you, right? If you imagine, if I had never if I had never done this motion before, right, and someone leads me to do that, even if they lead me to do that perfectly, I'm probably going to do something weird and like, what the heck, because my body is not used to that motion, right? So if you want to get used to hops, skips, jumps, things like that, you got to just start doing hops. Here's a good hop to try out, right? It's kind of a skip, right? Another good hop. Let me make sure my feet are in this. So that hop is where I'm scooping my leg up, jumping over and landing on the same foot, and then transferring weight, right? So I'm hopping off of that foot, landing on the same foot, changing weight. Ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. Another hop is where you actually use the strength of your leg to pull your body. So you like kick it out like that, but instead of stopping your momentum, you let it swing your momentum. And you can do that backward too, where you swing it back or to the side, kind of hard, but it's cool if you can do it where you go or to the other side, right? So using a leg or body part to drag the rest of your body in a direction is a great way. Doing it out of something where, like, say you go triple step and hop, right? Or doing just a slow and hop, right? Actually, I guess there's two ways of looking at hops, right? One is where you jump off of one foot and land on the same foot, right? And if you're available to do this with me right now, try it out. Get up and just jump and land on the same foot, right? And the other one is where you jump from one foot to land on the other. Boom. Right? And those are both things you want to get used to. And by the way, in these lessons, I'll often ask you to get up with me and try something out. And certainly if you're not in the position to do that, go ahead and ignore that right now. Try it later. But I think if you are able to, go ahead and do that with me. It will sink it in a little bit more and remind you of it later more than if you just see me do it. So make sure you're using the kinesthetic learning of actually applying things if you're capable. Okay, so what are some other skips that we could do, or hops? Two-footed hops where you're just hopping like that, boom, 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 right? So anything like that that you're practicing, if you watch some videos, just look for some things where people are doing hops and skips. I'm sure you could Google it and look for different methods. But get more in your body and you'll become more comfortable. So that's kind of the first obvious, easy answer. The second one I would say is, so how do we lighten up our tension? Now this is not just for hops, right? This is for anything. You want to be able to lighten up your tension if you want to, right? So that you can feel like you can move with the amount of tension that your partner wants. And so I've been thinking of a way that you can practice this on your own. And there's a kind of a cool little trick that you can do with a rope or scarf and a doorknob. So I'm going to take this rope and I'm going to wrap it around the doorknob, right, so that it easily slides back and forth like this. Do you see that? Okay. Then with one hand, I'm going to follow, right? So this hand, my lower hand is going to follow, and my upper hand is going to lead. And I'm going to start with it close to me here, body, just for simplicity, and my right arm is going to be farther away. Or my lead arm is going to be farther away, stretched out, right? Now well, first let's just relax, right? Start relaxed, and then start pulling until you get a connection with your other arm. So you're going to pull with your right arm or your lead arm until the left arm gets taut and you feel, oh, there's some connection there. Some of you might keep pulling until you get out to here before you get a connection. But ideally, if we're relaxed, as soon as you start to pull, you go ahead and connect and you have resistance. So I already have like 2 pounds of pressure between my hand and the scarf on both hands because there's resistance both ways, right? Now I'm going to take steps with this 2 pounds of pressure. Nice and light. If 2 pounds seems heavy to you, think 0.1 pound, right? Just think light pressure, but enough that you can feel that there's tension connected through your body. Now that you're taking steps, you're going to pull your body forward without losing the connection, right? So if you watch, I'm out here, and I'm going to use my right hand or the lead hand up here to pull myself all the way as far forward as I can without losing connection. And then I'll walk it back, having that connection again. And then I can do it faster or it's slower, right? And now notice at one of those times I actually lost connection. When I pulled, I had 2 pounds of pressure, and I pulled and I went slack just a little bit. Not that much, but I went a little slack like that, right? So I messed up. Or if I have 2 pounds of pressure and I pull harder, it gets even more taut, and then I have like 5 pounds of pressure. That's what she's talking about, like it getting heavier between the partners. Or it might be what she's talking about, is that it's getting heavier between the partners. So that's a really cool way. And you can add your own dance movement into that. I was showing it with just taking steps, but you can do triple steps, you can do kicks, you can do step hips, you can do any step in dance that you want to practice. You can do that while leading yourself to move forward. The key thing to be aware of is you want to be paying more attention to the follow hand than the lead hand, right? Because the lead hand is going to be leading, so you don't have to worry too much about that. But you need to pay attention to the hand that you're actually trying to work on, which is the follow. Now, if you're in the lead role and you're trying to improve your leading and maintaining a nice soft connection, it would be a different story, I think. Then you'd want to focus more on your right hand, and as you're pulling, making sure that you don't pull so hard that the tension increases, or pull too softly or too slowly, and then you lose that connection. So you would actually focus more on the right hand. Either way, though, you're focusing on keeping the tension the same as you lead or follow. Or I guess as you lead and follow. Okay, so the next thing I would say is matching and practicing postures that keep you prepared. Right, so the other thing about being light on is making sure you're in a position where you're prepared to move, right? And especially if you're doing a hop or a skip, a lot of times it's easy to not be prepared. And especially if you're doing like a blues dance or a dance that often goes into counterbalance. Christina, can I borrow you? So if you watch, a lot of times dancers, when they're in closed position, they do steps where they sit back away from each other, right? But it's really easy as you're sitting back away from each other to get onto your heels where you're not quite as balanced with your partner. I get this a lot when I'm dancing with someone and I just do something simple like this. They get back on their heels and our weight is imbalanced, right? And now as a lead, I can help fix that by trying to bring them back a little. But as a follow, she can try to fix that by just never going so far that she gets out of balance, right? She's got to try to match my amount of distance so that we all stay always flat, I guess flat-footed would be my preference, so that I can feel my whole foot, and then I have the even if I'm in this weird position, I have the ability to hop over because my whole foot is on the floor. Whereas if I'm in this position but I'm kind of falling backward, it's a lot harder and awkward, and I feel clunky trying to do it. Certainly still possible, but a lot harder than when you have that flat foot. So what I would say is you want to try to practice just going into counterbalance with somebody, whether it be an open position or whether it be in closed position, doesn't matter. But trying to go in counterbalance to the point where you can have that full foot resistance. And we can go really far into counterbalance and still have this full foot resistance, right? It doesn't have to be, it doesn't mean it can't go far, it just means we have to balance each other. Because what happens when one person is going further than the other is one person starts getting on their heels and the other person gets on their toes, right? Because there's an imbalance of the weight that's being shared between the partners. Yeah. So my suggestion to practice that on your own would actually be to just take a chair and look at like how far can you go with this chair, because this chair has its own kind of ability to resist me. As I sit back, like this is already a little too far for this chair, the way it's positioned right now, for me to sit back that far. Let me show you from this angle. All right, I can go to about there with my feet being flat. If I go further, I start to lose connection, the chair's connection to the ground, right? But if I change the chair to this angle, I can go a little bit further while still having my feet grounded into the floor. And if I take the doorknob, for instance, and use the doorknob, right, then I can sit really far back while still having that connection because it's really solid, right? But what I'm looking for is, are my feet well planted, or am I in a position somehow that that my feet aren't well planted? And most likely that's a function of the connection between you and your partner, as well as your body position, but even more so probably a connection between you and your partner. All right, if there's any questions on that, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to jump on to the next question, and I'll go ahead and read it while I'm giving you about 30 seconds to ask any questions on that, but I'll read this next one. Do you have a recommendation for the follow's head position during a turn? I just took a class where the follows were asked to look over our shoulders in the direction that we were turning. This has the benefit of letting us see the lead and whatever he might be preparing to do, reconnect with us as we end the turn. Previously, I'd held my head still in relation to my body, looking straight forward. Looking over my shoulder actually makes me more dizzy for some reason, though I do like the way it looks. I know I can overcome the dizziness with practice, but I wonder what your perspective is. I think there's a lot of cool ways that you can move your head. The thing that I like about what they're talking about is that you're refocusing on your partner, right? So you're looking for your partner, you're focusing on them. The thing that I want to caution people when they do that is an increase in speed. So a lot of times you get a direction, a rotational lead that leads your body to go at this speed, right? Let's say you're going at this speed, and you start to go at that speed, but then you look, you move your head to look at them, and as you're going at that speed, it speeds you up, right? And that can be cool if you're trying to speed yourself up, but if you're trying to follow their speed of rotation, you've got to be aware that as you're looking for them, when you turn your head to look for them, you don't turn it so much that it increases your body's rotation. So that's the thing I would be cautious about. But I do like that concept of kind of partner, looking for your partner. So I would say that's probably a great basic to go for after. I mean, for me, if I'm teaching someone, at first I'm not going to talk about the head at all, right? Like the head's going to come later when we have details, when we're talking about details. But I think once they kind of have, however they're naturally doing the spin down, I think that would be a great addition to take them to their next level. But I would also play with other things too. I mean, I've seen people that spin with their head up. Can you do that? Yeah. So, right, that's kind of a cool style. Do you have any other head positions that you like? Right. Of course, that is when you're given that lead, right? I mean, you could probably do it yourself in some. Yeah. Right. So she's kind of tilting her head to an angle, as well as kind of tilting her body to create this cool effect. as she's spinning. So I think in that case, we're talking about a visual look that you're trying to create, right? So I think as a basic, looking for your partner is a great kind of next step of going for what you're trying to do. I've also heard of people talk about spotting down the line, like look where you're going, right? So it's not necessarily looking for your partner. If your partner's behind where you're going, you might be looking the other way. And that's a good one for safety, right? For like, if you're going in that direction, may check out where it is so that you know that there's space there. So yeah, for me, like I mean, you'll hear this a lot from me. There is no right way, right? There's just benefits and negatives to each, and those are the benefits and negatives that I can think of for each of those. Yeah, or I guess those are the benefits for each of those. Again, if there's any questions on that, any follow-up, let me know. Yeah. You want to ask a question? Or what? Answer it. Yeah. Go for it. Christina has one more idea. If you guys don't know Christina, by the way, Christina is an amazing dancer. Does ballroom dance, West Coast swing, Lindy Hop, like blues dancing. She does all sorts of dances. One of my favorite dancers to dance with. And so very excited to have her here helping out today. So she has one more thought.
And just in terms of where you're looking, if I'm rotating, because you said in your question that you were getting dizzy, and also if it's difficult, sometimes when it's difficult, it's because people are looking for their partner, but they're also changing their head position while they look, which is going to upset my balance and make it harder to do. So you want to make sure that while you're looking for your partner, you're doing it in such a way that you can still stay balanced. Usually that's keeping your head over your shoulders, over your hips, over your feet. The other thing is if you're getting dizzy, if I'm kind of always looking the direction that I'm turning, that can make you dizzier. So one of the things that you can do is look the direction you're going, but spot while you do it. So I'm going to look for him, and then look for him, and then look for him. But I can do it in such a way that I spot, which will hopefully help you get less dizzy.
And just to be, for a little bit of clarity, when she was pointing out, like, when you're spotting, not to change your angle, no, the thing that I want to point out is that if you don't want to change your angle, because earlier she showed something where she did change her angle, but she was on balance as she changed her angle, right? So it's okay to be in a weird angle or something if you have the balance to do it. But if you're moving your head and it's taking you off balance, that's where the issue can be. Yeah. And the just another thing that's interesting, like I was talking earlier about the speed up of a spot turn, right? That was a good example of when she did that last spot turn, she was speeding up the rotation and slowing it down and speeding up and slowing it down. And that's, if you're trying to match their speed, you want to be aware to, like if we were to go super slow, like she spots with her head, then her head fixes, and her body still goes the same speed, right? And it fixes, and then it goes the same speed. But her lower body is still matching that, right? Which is really hard to do. Cool, thank you. All right. If there's any other questions, pop them in. Otherwise, I'm going to go on. I'll give you like 30 seconds, and then I'll hop on to the next question. About aerials. All right, I'm going to read the question while, in case anybody has any things they're typing in, just to keep it going. So she says, my partners are doing different kinds of lifts with me. I love it, but being so new to lifts, I have no training, so I often feel like I don't know how to participate in the move both safely, effectively, and creatively. I'm not sure how to position my body or to disengage gracefully other than doing core exercises to create strength. What other suggestions do you have for me to learn lifts? All right, I got a bunch of suggestions for this, and I think the first thing I'm going to say is lifts are something that are not necessarily normally done on the social dance floor. It really depends on the space that you're at. Some spaces don't allow them at all on the social dance floor. Some places, certain lifts are okay, just depends. So I do want to say, like, just check with your space and find out what is okay with them, because if it's not okay, if for some reason they don't want you doing lifts, then I would go ahead and tell the lead, oh, like, this place doesn't really like doing lifts. You know, so save it for a jam circle, save it for a little time where you can show off, or for practice, or a different venue. So that's the first thing I would say. And then there are ways to engage your body to stop a lift from happening, but I would say most likely if you're new to lifts, you're not going to learn the muscle memory to engage those muscles before it happens. So my suggestion would be to just, as soon as you notice one happen, you know, of course, if you can stop it, go for it, but I would just talk to the person as soon as it's done and say, hey, you know, it's not supposed to happen at this place, if that's the case. Or if you just don't like them, if you don't want them, you can tell somebody, you know, I prefer not to do lifts, and I'm sure a lot of people love them, but it's just not my thing, you know. And if you're worried about that confrontational kind of saying that kind of thing, you can prep it with, you know, something like, hey, do you mind if I share something with you? It's kind of scary for me to share this with you, but I'm trying to defeat fears, and that's an easy fear that I have. Or this is a fear that I have, so I'd like to talk about it. So that's something you can say to prep it, and then they'll say, oh, sure, what's your, you know, what do you want to say? And then just be like, I feel, make sure it's about you rather than you shouldn't be doing lifts. Make it more like, I prefer not to do lifts. Or, you know, this establishment prefers not to do lifts. But don't make them wrong, right? Anyway, so that's the first thing I'm going to say. But then let's look at, okay, how do we actually do lifts? How do we practice them on our own to improve them? So first thing I'm going to say is, if you want to take off, you got to know how to land, right? Just like in when you fly a plane, they teach you landing techniques and stuff before they ever get you in the air, because they need you to be able to land. So that's the first thing I would do, is I'd look at, let's practice some landing drills and make sure that everything's functioning. So now I'm going to assume that we're doing big lifts, and because it's easier to show you the method of the feet moving and the body moving when I exaggerate it, but just know, even if you're doing a small lift, same concept on a smaller level. So first thing is, let's just try jump and land. A small little hop and land. And things you want to pay attention to are, you don't want your legs to lock, right? And if you're trying this at home with me, which I recommend you do a small one and lock your legs. And just notice you can feel a little bit of stress. As long as it's a small one, it's probably not going to be too much stress, but the higher up you go, the more it's going to be stress on your legs. At the same time, when you do this, you also don't want to land down here where you have no room to absorb, right? So you can try that out, and notice it also puts stress on your knees if you land too low, because you don't have room absorbing. So my goal is always to land as close as possible to a locked position without actually being locked, so that I can then, once I land, I can absorb as much as I need, right? And in a small jump, it's a very small absorption. A bigger jump, it's a little bit more absorption. But I still try to land here so that I can absorb, versus landing in this position where then my absorption has to happen later or further down. So that's one of the things I'd look for, making sure my knees are not bending forward, but that my butt is sitting back. And then my shoulders stay over my knees and toes, and that they're not leaning too far forward or sitting too far back. But really, the thing that I'm looking for is that I'm not putting stress on my knees or my ankles, too much on my knees or my ankles. And if for some reason a position is putting more stress on your knees or ankles, and a different position works better, go with that different position. Your body might function slightly differently. All right, so that's landing. Oh, and another great thing when you start practicing the landing drills is to then go, like if you want to practice higher ones, but you're not a high jumper, you can use a chair, and you can actually just step on the chair, right, and just walk off of it. And then you've got like that much height, but maybe you can't jump that high, but you're practicing landing with that height, which is something that in an aerial you might get up that high. So it's nice to be able to practice that. Another thing, one other thing I want is as my body is going up in the air, I'm usually contracting my legs, and as my body is coming down, I'm usually bringing them down. Right, and if my body's stationary, my body's stationary. So if we look at like each step of the way, it would go, I'm going up, and then I'm in the air, right, and my legs are up, and I'm frozen here, and then when I come down, my legs expand again. And that allows, especially that when you're coming down, your legs expanding is important, because if you don't, that's when you end up landing in these positions where you're down, landing in this position and not being able to absorb. So it's really important that you let your legs out as your body comes down. All right, let's see. After landing, we've got pushing off the chair and testing for stability. Okay, so anytime you do an aerial, you want to be, I want to try to be connected to the floor even when I'm in the air, right? So if I'm dancing with somebody, what I mean by connected to the floor is that I can feel it. So if you watch, if I push against this chair, at some point the chair resists, and I can feel the friction on the floor. If I push too hard, I no longer feel the friction, right? No more friction. If I pull, no friction. But if I push just the right amount, I feel that friction, right? And when I'm doing an aerial, I want to feel that friction so I know that person has a solid base that they're using. So as I'm doing this, I could do it with the chair, and I could go in, and I could push off. And notice there's still a connection. But if I push too hard in one way or another, I lose the connection with the chair's resistance against the floor. If you watch, whoa, right, it's gone. So I always want to make sure that it's there before I jump, and as I'm jumping, I want to make sure that it's there, and that I'm not pressing in a way that's taking it away, right? By pressing too hard, or by not pressing at all and losing connection with it, right? Where I go, so I'm pressing just the right amount. So that's what I would do, is I would just go boom and practice this a bunch. This is a great drill to feel the connection. Yeah. And the other thing is not to push too hard, right? Not to overstress. You only need the muscles to lift yourself up. You don't need it to go, like if you put, everybody put their arms out in front of them and just hold them and just do this, right? We all can do this. Now take your arms and go, and squeeze them tight and still do this, right? So we can do this motion with a lot of tension or with very little tension. And that will make a huge difference for your lead. If you're adding excess tension, it makes it feel heavier for them, makes it a lot harder for them to hold you up than if you're really relaxed and only giving the tension that you need. Which goes into the next topic, which is you've got to give them some tension, right? If someone is leading up in an upward direction, right, on your arm, then you've got to resist that up. Christina, right? So So if you look at her arm, if I'm pressing upward into her arm, she's got to resist it so that there's a connection there, right? If we relax, and let's say I do this and you don't press and I go like this, then we get this thing going and there's no connection, right? So as soon as you feel that connection going up, you resist so that you've got something for the lead to lead on, right? But notice she's resisting. She's not, go ahead and push down. She's not pushing down. See that difference? Watch. Resisting or pushing down, right? So she wants to match my resistance without like pushing me to the ground. And that's the same when she's going in the air. She can push herself up, right? She can try to push herself up, but she doesn't want to push me down. You see that difference? If you watch with my hands here, right, she can go onto her toes and lift her body up and use this to when you're pushing yourself up, right? But she doesn't want to do it this time and push me down, right? Push me down. So she's got to find that right amount of tension, which is what the whole testing the friction is all about, right? When you first start with someone, you've got a certain amount of tension, and that's the amount that you can use to then push yourself up as you go, right? But if you go over that by too much, you're going to be pushing the other person down. Okay. And recognize the connection can happen in a lot of different areas. Actually, I need you one more time. Sorry. The connection can happen in the arm here, on the top of my arm, bottom of her arm, right? It can happen on the back, right, where I'm just pulling up on her back and she's resisting in to it. It could happen in the hands, right? Anywhere else that you can think of? With the leg, right? Oh yeah, I've done one where if you step on my feet, like, right, where you actually lift it from the person stepping on your feet. Now you can't see that. Hold on. So I actually lead the person to step onto my foot, and then I go, woo! Right? You can lead them from the hip, where you're popping them up through the hip, and same concept. I'm applying pressure here. She needs to resist that pressure without pushing back on me. Right? Go ahead and push back on me with your hip. See how now she's adding pressure versus just resisting the pressure? Or don't resist it, not resisting the pressure, and she breaks her frame. Which, again, if you go back to fine-tuning your connection, beauty of doing nothing, that class is so important for everything else we do. And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, it's the concept of matching somebody's push, matching somebody's pull, basically matching the equal and opposite resistance that they give you wherever they give it to you, anywhere on your body, including a relaxed connection, matching the relax. All right, let's see. The next thing is to just work on your own body being comfortable in the air, right? And here's a great solo drill that you can practice. So what you need for the solo drill is you need just empty space and something to press against. I will use the wall, or no, I'll use this chair because it's more obvious. Let's see. Yeah. So you lie down in some form of plank position where you're on your side, right? And then you press against something that doesn't move, like a chair. And if you can lift your legs up a little and lift your upper body, so wait, let me show it from this angle real quick. So my legs are going to be in the air, and then my upper body is going to be in the air, so that I've got as little of my body on the ground as possible. Just my butt is on the ground, right? And then I press against the chair, and you'll feel your stomach muscles and everything start to engage, more so than if you just sit here like this. I mean, this is good too, but pressing against that chair adds those extra muscles. And then try slowly changing into different positions where, let me show different positions. So you could be like this, you could be spread out more in a Lindy Hop style, right? You could be crunched up, You could be straight as possible, but you try different things, and while you're trying each of those, you're pressing against the chair or pulling against it. That engages different muscles when you press versus when you pull. And the reason to do this is that you're strengthening your core muscles without having to do it in the air, right? If you think about the average person that practices aerials only gets the really important training of those core muscles, and not just the core, I don't want to say that, not just the core, of your entire body connection, right? They only get that entire body connection once in a while when they're in the air and everything is going perfect. And even then, odds are that it's not going perfect. They aren't getting those muscles engaged, right? So just doing some things like that where you lay on the ground, get most of your body in the air, can be really powerful. Also, if you press with, you can press with your hand, but you can also press with your legs against the chair, against the wall. You can press with your knee, different areas of your body, just to get used to the connection being in different areas, because you're not always going to have a connection in the hands, right? But if you think about it, when I press against the chair, that's essentially my connection pressing against my partner, feeling them connected to the ground, right? So it's like I'm recreating that whole thing. All right, let's see. And the last thing is to wait for your partner is the last thing I would say is don't jump too early. The biggest thing that happens in aerials and dips, more so in dips, but also in aerials a lot, is that as soon as the partner knows that it's going to happen, they go for it, right? And there needs to be a little bit of waiting so that you have the connection as you go through the lift. So like for me, as a lift goes, I'm always thinking connect to the floor when I'm the follow, right? I'm thinking connect to the floor, not thinking jump. The jump's going to happen. I'm not worried about it because I know I've jumped before. I know that's going to happen. But what's not natural is that idea of connecting to the floor that makes it so much more connected and so much more smooth. And let me just show you what I mean. If you do this early, it's so subtle, but it makes such a big difference. So if you watch, if I have a connection here with my partner going up and she has one down, right? Now let's say we're going down to prep for an aerial. Now we have a nice connection between us, and as we go up, we have that connection, and as she goes into the air, right, it continues to have this nice solid connection. But if she keeps her frame like this, and we go down, and as you keep your frame, now start to go up before me. Now, but slowly, just a little, right? Notice right there, there's a little spot in between our hands. And what's going to happen is that I'm going to power up because I'm not going to notice this difference here most of the time. I'm going to power up, and then I'm going to smack into her, right? So it's not going to be smooth anymore. It's going to have this feeling of like chunkiness. So you want to go down together. You want to make sure that the follow, if anything, waits longer. The lead goes up first. Now, that time we went up together, right? But even like it could happen where I go up and then she comes up just a half second later would be, to me, a little bit better than her going sooner. I shouldn't say better, I should say more connected. It'll definitely be heavier, but it'll be way more connected and more comfortable, more safe if the follow waits, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the way I like to think about this is there's two parts to the lift. There's the connection that you establish in the lift, and then there's the explosion of the lift, and those have to be separate. Like you have to have the connection as a follow, but I have to wait until I feel him explode in order to explode myself. Versus this follow is a mistake that commonly gets made, is we take the resistance of the connection to also mean liftoff, and then we go too early. And I think that's also true just in like general lead follow. Like if he sends me into a rock step and I take that pull connection to mean, oh, he wants me to rebound, then we do what I call bouncing out of the connection, where I just take the resistance of the connection and take it to its next step, rather than waiting for the leader to change the connection and actually tell me what they want.
And now, none of you guys are probably doing this to that extreme that she just showed, right? But what's probably happening is just a small, if you can see the difference between what she's waiting. This time she's waiting for me, right? And waiting for me to pull it back, versus a very small, her jumping ahead. See that? That's what most people do, is that really small, almost can't even tell the difference, but there's the difference between us having this pull connection, the length of time that I'm asking for it, versus it disappearing before I ask for it to go away. All right. If there's any other last questions on that or anything else, pop them in, but I think we're at time. So if there aren't any questions, I'm going to close out the call. I'll give you about 30 seconds to put in any last questions that I can clear up on anything that we've talked about so far. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. So I'm going to say thank you guys very much, and I'll see you next time.